Welcome to the Wildlife Health Talks. This is a very special episode. We're recording this on the occasion of International Women's Day. Instead of one guest, we have 6 of them today. 6 women, 5 continents, 6 with me. And between them, decades of experience spanning wildlife, veterinary practice, disease research, government policy, rehab, and international conservation. From Wyoming to Kenya, from Indonesia to Brazil, from Taiwan to Germany. Today, we're celebrating women in wildlife health, their achievements, their journeys, and the experiences of working in a field that hasn't always made space for them. I'm your host, Kat Fendel, and today, joining me, we have Dr. Aimei Cheng. She's a wildlife veterinarian and academic at the National Pingtung University of Science and Technology in Taiwan. And she's also the secretary of the WDA Asia Pacific section. Welcome, Aimei.
Hello, everyone.
Then we have Dr. Sharon Malindi. She's a senior veterinary officer at Kenya Wildlife Service and a master student of conservation medicine at the University of Edinburgh. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, like you said, my name is Dr. Sharon Lindy. I am a wildlife veterinarian, currently working in the Northern Kenya region. I am also the vice chairperson for the WDA Africa and Middle East branch. So thank you for having me.
Awesome, thanks. And we have Dr. Arisia Duarte Benvenuto. She's a veterinarian and postdoctoral researcher at the Laboratory of Wildlife Comparative Pathology at the University of São Paulo in Brazil. Welcome, Arisia.
Hello, Kat. Hello, all ladies, colleagues. It's a very honored to be here with y'all today. As Kat mentioned, I am from Brazil and I'm currently doing some research and working with some rehab facilities. And I'm also the vice chair of the Latin American section of WDA and very happy to be with you all today to talk a little bit about women in science and wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Dr. Kim Grützmacher. She's a wildlife and conservation veterinarian working for the German Federal Agency for Nature Conservation as head of the Division for International Nature Conservation. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks, Kat. It's really exciting to be here among those amazing women. So thank you very much for setting this up. Happy to be here.
And we have Dr. Samantha Allen. She's the supervisor of the Veterinary Service Unit of Wyoming Game and Fish Department. She's a state wildlife veterinarian for Wyoming and the president of the American Association of Wildlife Veterinarians. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks for having me, Kat, and I'm excited to chat with everyone today. It looks like a really good group of ladies, so it should be really good.
Thanks. And I have to point out here, you can imagine having a conversation across so many different time zones. There are some people at both ends of the time zones, and Sam sacrificed herself today to chat with us at 5 a.m. her time. I cannot stop emphasizing that enough. I'm so impressed.
I also feel though North America tends to get the easy thing a lot. So I feel like I am taking one for the team and we rarely do. So I'm happy to do this today.
That's amazing. And then we have Dr. Francisca Solistio. She's a wildlife veterinarian and consultant specializing in orangutan conservation and rehabilitation in Indonesia and currently a PhD student at Adelaide University. Welcome, Siska.
Hi, Kat. Hi, everyone. It's very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And yes, I'm based in Indonesia, but now for the next 2 months, I'll be here in Adelaide starting my PhD. Thank you for having me.
Very cool. Welcome to the show to all of you. And thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with us and talking about your journeys and your experiences in wildlife health. That's really cool. And I would like to point out before we start and jump into the questions, it's very important to say that all opinions that are voiced by the panel members today are their own and they do not necessarily reflect the perspective of their affiliated institutions. So please bear that in mind when listening. All right, let's jump into the individual journeys. Let's start with a quick round. So 1 sentence per person. I know it's hard, but you can do this. So can each of you, ladies, please finish the sentence in 1 sentence? I ended up in wildlife health because, and let's just go backwards. Siska, you had to wait so long until I introduced you. So you ended up in wildlife health because?
I ended up in wildlife because honestly, then I was young, I was adventurous, I did not think things through, but then I found my passion.
I'm so glad you didn't think it through at the very beginning. Sam, you ended up in wildlife health because?
Gosh, I wish I had that previous answer, but mainly because I was more passionate about wild creatures than learning about micro and macroeconomics when I was an undergraduate. So
That's pretty awesome. Kim, why did you end up in wildlife health?
Yeah, tough one for in 1 sentence. But if I had to summarize it, I'd say I ended up in wildlife health because wildlife health is a really powerful lever to address global environmental change, and because I really love wildlife.
Pretty good one. Aricia, how about you? How did you end up in wildlife health?
I ended up in wildlife health because I was deeply in love and interest on marine mammals, and I wanted to understand not only their biology, but how they respond to the challenges of this rapidly changing environment and how I could contribute to their care and conservation.
Awesome. Sharon, how about you?
I ended up in wildlife health because I saw a vet dart out of a helicopter once and I said I wanted to do that. But I've always just loved animals and had a connection with the natural world, and it just felt right coming into this field.
Awesome, thanks. And I May, why did you end up in wildlife health?
Okay, I end up in wildlife health because that wildlife, there's no one can speak for themselves. And I think there needs someone to speak for them. So I joined this research.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Siska, you spent many years working with some of Indonesia's most iconic species. Was wildlife always the plan, or did you stumble into it?
Yes, like I answered the first question, I definitely stumbled into it, or you can say it, I took a chance on a serendipity. So yeah, I never planned on working with wildlife or orangutans. But then, yeah, as soon as I graduated, I have this job opening in Orangutan Rehabilitation Center in Borneo, Indonesia, and then I just applied. And yes, exactly, I did not think things through. Never had any experience with primates before. And then you can imagine first encounter with any kind of primate besides human is with the orangutans. So it's crazy, it's fun. And then and you guys, I'm sure you guys have seen baby orangutans in picture or in real life, and you see how cute they are. So when I first came to the center, it was almost magical. It's the center where I worked first was a big one, and it housed hundreds of orangutans. And when I first afternoon meeting them in a big playground, and then there's these hundreds of baby orangutans playing around, and yeah, I just fell in love at the first time, and been doing it ever since. And now I'm thinking things longer now, so I'm thinking more in a bigger picture and try to help the species, not in the hands-on way, but probably in a bigger way, through research, through advocacy, through policy making, those kind of things.
Thank you. And you all work with different species, and your daily lives look very different, maybe also similar in certain ways. But Sharon, Kenya is home to some of the most iconic wildlife on the planet, and Kenyan Wildlife Service is on the ground protecting it every day. Just briefly, what does a typical week look like for you? And what is the one health challenge you find most pressing right now in Kenya? I know, huge question for a short answer. Challenges on.
Yeah, I describe a typical week for me as controlled chaos because every single day is unpredictable. And I'm sure every single person who has done wildlife medicine will agree with me that the only reliable constant is how unpredictable everything is. So I don't really have a typical week per se. You'll wake up one day and there's like an elephant with a spear, a giraffe that needs to be rescued, or someone calls you and says, we have a mass die-off of birds and we need you to come and investigate. So I'd say the first few hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours of my day are usually normal. So just prepping for any unexpected things. In terms of One Health, we do have several One Health challenges in the country. So I work in a very arid part of the country and it's quite dry. But I would say one of the challenges we're facing right now is climate change. And for a lot of people, it's a very abstract concept. But for us here on the ground and for the communities that we work with and the wildlife that we work with, it's very real. And we're getting more droughts, we're getting flooding in some areas. And this is just altering how we see different things in an environmental level, in an animal level, and in a human level. So I'd say climate change is one of the biggest things affecting us and our work right now.
Yeah, thank you. Very scary for sure. Sam, Wyoming is a state with vast wild landscapes and a significant wildlife livestock conflict. So as a state wildlife veterinarian, what's the disease challenge keeping you busiest at the moment?
So livestock wildlife conflict, yes, definitely. There's a ton of that. One of the biggest disease challenges at the moment, though, is chronic wasting disease, which isn't 100% livestock applicable, but I think based on movement and how people interact with domestic and wildlife creatures, it definitely plays a role in there. And for those that know CWD, it's a terrible disease, right? It's non-conventional. It's not like all of our other pathogens. There's no cure or treatment. So there is definitely every day there's something tied to it that I have to think about or work with. And then with that just comes everything political. And unfortunately, that is where animal health is going more and more. It's not just about animals and disease anymore, it's about stakeholders too. So a lot of my day is spent building relationships, maintaining them, education. So while I'd love it to be only about infectious disease, because I love infectious disease, and that sounds really weird, but I think in this group of ladies, they're going to forgive me for that one. A lot of it is those other skills, right? Talking to people on the phone that maybe don't know what a prion is. So that is some of the things keeping me really busy lately.
Yeah, this is obviously a very safe space, so you can tell us all about your preferences. I think we all share that, so it's all good. Cool. Kim, you have said, I've read this about you in one of your little bios online, that health is a powerful lever for making the impacts of environmental change tangible for people and societies. Can you give us a concrete example of what you mean by that?
Sure, happy to. There are plenty examples, but I think one that is quite prominent or more recent was the COVID-19 pandemic, when we were in a position to address how new pathogens originate, how our relationship with wildlife can have an effect on the likelihood of new diseases emerging. And before the pandemic, when I was in zoonosis research, our community colleagues have been trying to talk about the potential of new diseases emerging, all including from wildlife, depending on how we manage and deal with wildlife, which is something that nobody really wanted to hear. But then the pandemic came and that got a lot of attention, which was good and bad, because it's one thing to communicate about how pathogens originate. It's another one to communicate at the same time that it's not the wildlife that is posing the danger as such, but it is actually our behavior and dealings with wildlife that can pose a risk. Then the pandemic, while it was on, I was being told that we're too busy with the pandemic now, we have to get through it before we can think about prevention in the future. And then once it was over, everybody was tired of hearing about a pandemic and emerging diseases. So it's been really frustrating. Anyway, but this was one example how I imagined we could actually link something that is really abstract and can happen anywhere on the globe, and how this is tied to everyone's health and life everywhere. But unfortunately, it didn't quite work in the way that I had hoped for or anticipated. But yeah, whatever we do, it is all connected. All of you know that a lot of the things that we work on and global environmental issues are inherently global. And whether it's pollution, whether it's biodiversity loss, whether it's climate whatever we do, everybody will suffer from it eventually if we don't address it in the right way. These aren't local issues, even though they have local effects.
Thank you for explaining that. The reason why you are all here is that it is International Women's Day. So let's jump into that topic a bit more. Wildlife health, particularly the field side of things, has historically been a pretty male-dominated world. And my question to you is, has that been your experience and has it changed? May, do you want to comment on that?
In Taiwan, most of the people work on wildlife and study veterinary. It's more, women is more and more. The number is increased. Even the woman is more than the men. Yes,
Okay.
for
Yeah, interesting. And how about Siska? How about you?
You know that I work in a wildlife rehabilitation center near the forest, and then working with wildlife in the field obviously needs a lot of physical work, and it could be hard in times for women. But during my experience, I was lucky enough that the work culture in my organization then was less patriarchal than other parts of the region. And then it also helped that my boss at that time was a woman, and she's a very dominant person. So it helps with the setting up the work culture. In terms of challenges in the field, I guess, yes, obviously it's very physical. And then when you go on a rescue mission, for example, to remote areas, there are, as a woman, there are limitations that you have to understand when you're talking to other people, to men, obviously. And then there are, you need to think further. And then you also have to observe how you behave, how you dress. It helps me a little bit because I'm a local, I'm Indonesian, and I work in Indonesia.
Yeah, thank you. So has any of you ever been in a situation where your gender directly affected how you were treated in either positive or negative way? I leave this open, hoping that someone jumps in. Arisia, lights have gone off, but you're still with us.
Yes, I'm back now in the wild.
Oh,
Not
lovely.
necessarily, I think, affected in Brazil, as everyone said, like we have a lot of women taking more leadership roles. We have a lot of women in vets, but what I feel sometimes is that not necessarily because women are taking leadership roles that we are going forward in the culture aspect of the male dominance. So one thing that still happens and that bothers me a lot, it's a lot of still the perpetuation of women competition. And that's something that even though the women are taking more leadership roles, sometimes we are just continuing to act as this culture-based male dominance. So it's very sometimes challenging for us to change that as the new generation and to combine together. So when we are working with wildlife, we all know that we need to have a lot of good communication and collaboration. So that's something that I feel right now as women being like with a lot of empathy and as good communicators, we can change that. And I feel that we are in this transitioning moment that we are changing a lot. So not necessarily affected me in a direct way, like I don't have a story of something, but in the small details, we all feel a little bit of that impact on how this cultural system impacts us daily on small details. I don't know if that answers the question.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Arisia. And Kim, how about your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Kat. I think it's less like a single situation. It's more a systemic, like everyday situation where, the individual situation may not, you could interpret it as such, but it's really difficult to pinpoint. But I think there are definitely systemic imbalances. Let's say who gets on which publication, who gets to be invited to a panel, obviously not this panel, but who gets to speak, who gets the space. Are ideas of women heard as much and recognized as much as of male members? And I've definitely had lots of experiences where the one male member of a group was the one that got all the attention, the ideas that maybe would have come from a woman were not heard when she voiced it. When he voiced it, it was heard and recognized. etc., etc. I think we've probably all had these experiences and where women get kicked off maybe of a publication or something. And when you as a woman try to bring it up and voice it, the reaction will be quite different than from a man. We're being perceived as difficult rather than assertive, etc., etc. I think it's less a single situation than it is a systemic everyday experience. But even though it is often subtle, sometimes not so subtle at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sam, do you want to share any either general or specific experience with us, with the group?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Kim said, and I don't want to just parrot everything, but I think it also speaks to being a woman, right? That we have very similar examples and very similar like feelings about things. I've definitely had moments, and there's like key ones that stick with me where I've been called out because of my gender, or I've been put in situations that I don't think are fair because of my gender. And it stems from mainly always working in male dominated fields. Slaughter, regulatory medicine is a very male dominated field. Wildlife, especially like when I started, was very male dominated, and stuff has really changed with time. But similar to what Kim and others have said, it's really like the small microaggressions day after day that I think pile up, because you can talk to someone through a big example, right? You know, when someone says something silly and you're like, hey, that's not okay. The tiny ones, like the parroting your ideas and getting the attention, or, you know, I really didn't notice it so much when I was younger, but now that I'm older, like people comment on what I look like more. And I don't know if that's just because I'm a woman, but I don't see my male colleagues getting comments on that as much as I do. And they're not always negative, right? But it's just, damn, I don't want to hear about it today. You know what I mean? It's 5 a.m. I did my best. Like, here we are. And it's just little things, right? That I think get more, and yeah, so I think it's interesting that we're all saying the same stuff. And sometimes you're a bit sad because you're like, oh man, is this part of being a woman in wildlife? But also, I think it's awesome that we can come together in a panel like this and share that with other women. And hopefully someone hears this and they're like, yes, I am not the only one that's dealing with something like that too.
Yeah, thank you. That's very valuable. And I think often it is those little subtle things, right? That I guess a lot of people are not even aware of if they haven't had that revelation of, oh, maybe making those comments is not actually great, because it never really had consequences until they started thinking about it. Really good point. Sharon, would you like to share your thoughts and your experience?
Yeah, it's usually quite interesting because in Kenya, it's the opposite. Veterinary practice is more majority male dominated than women, but I do feel that's changing. Wildlife practice is the same, it's majority men, but that is definitely changing. There are more women coming on board, and I feel it's also because of representation. I was influenced by female wildlife vets, some of the few female wildlife vets, and I saw them and I saw that this is something I can do. This is a field I can get into. I always wanted to do it, but now I see it's possible. And then now you're seeing women who are having kids and families, and it's possible, and they're doing it, and they're doing an amazing job while balancing. Because for the longest time, especially here, it's always been you get in, but there's always questions of what are you going to do when you want to have a family? What are you going to do? And like Samantha said, your appearance is questioned. So many things are questioned. I feel there's a change, and there's a change because more women are speaking about their experiences, because I also feel like women used to be quite isolated in wildlife practice. But now that we have more of these networks, we're able to talk and get experience and just share our experiences and just improve the field for ourselves and for women coming after us. I'm positive it's going to change. I've obviously not had some of the best interactions, but I'd like to stay positive that it's going to change.
That's awesome to hear. Some of you have touched on that. There are more and more women entering veterinary medicine. And really, I find it interesting when I talk to my guests on this podcast, and they're from all parts of the world, really. And I ask them most of the time off record, like, oh, what is the ratio, or what was the men, women when you went to vet school? And then really in almost all countries, it's the same now, that women are dominating, and there are more and more female veterinarians entering the field. But in leadership positions, in wildlife health is still often held by men. And you were talking about how this is changing, but it seems like there is still quite a massive gap. If you want to share some thoughts on why this gap still persists, or do you think this is just the natural time it takes? So societal change always takes time. We know that. Do you guys have any comment or to share anything?
I might just jump in if that is okay. I manage primarily a group of women, and I've been really grateful that like more and more women are getting into wildlife health. But I think there's still, and I look at it this way, and this is not my intelligence, this is other smart people putting it out there. But when I was younger, folks talked about this glass ceiling for women, right? Like you could see, but you could never go through it. And from what like people are saying now, and I think it's very like applicable, I think for women, it's more of a labyrinth, right? It's not that you can't get into a leadership position. It's just that for some people, that kind of pathway to get there is very direct, right? There's no sharp turns here or there. You don't have to go backwards at some point. And I think for women in positions that do want to become leaders in certain ways, and that can look like many different things, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that like my title as a supervisor, maybe you're a leader in your community too, that can look like, oh, I took a right and I should have taken a left. So now I have to backtrack. Or, oh, I totally went the wrong way. I'm in a dead end now and I have to start the labyrinth all over again. And basically what it just means is that for women, typically we just have a harder pathway to get there. And there's a little bit more to it. And that can come with being a parent, right? So for women, predominantly still a lot of that in household duties are like put upon women. That can be cultural biases too. I know a lot of women aren't typically looked to as being leaders naturally. Like we're still trying to overcome that vision that people have of us that naturally we aren't like leaders. And so I think we are getting there 100%. And like Sharon and others have said, there are some kick-ass women in roles right now that are great. And some of those women are the ones that I look to as well, to like how I want to do my career. But I do still think we're in this labyrinth and it's maybe not the same or maybe not as fair on how we get there and what those paths look like, and the biases and cultural norms that we have to navigate are going to look different for each one of us. But yeah.
Thank you. That is a very powerful image, the labyrinth. That's definitely resonates with me a lot. Does anyone want to comment on that or share their own thoughts there?
I love the metaphor of the labyrinth, and I feel that for us to get there, I think we are getting, but for us to get there faster, I think we need to unite. When there's a position and you have a say on who's taking, we need to be for ourselves. Like we need to be combining efforts as women and empowering women as well. So if we have the possibility of empower women that are with us, that are above us, that are everywhere working with us, we need to combine efforts and basically just support each other. I think that's the way of us getting there faster, and listening to each other and always being very supportive and collaborative.
Awesome. Thank you. Kim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so many great things have already been said. Maybe just one more thought, something that I've been thinking about is questioning your own perception also. Like I see a lot what's happening in our profession where men are just naturally being perceived as more authoritative, more, maybe even more competent. And if you look into it, it's really not based on much other than perception. Not that they're not competent. I'm not saying male colleagues are not competent. Of course they are too. But sometimes it's funny how our perception is, and even including that of women and even younger women, how easy it is to take on a certain way of looking at things and interpreting things, and that certain male colleagues, which do have a very dominant or authoritative presence, that it's easy to buy into that and see that as rightfully leading, when I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's also up to all of us to reflect how we perceive each other, and whether certain ways of delivering information and science and ways of leading in our field is really what we want moving forward. So if that's always really a reflection of, let's say, academic merit, or if it's also just a certain tradition of acting and presenting and then also perceiving. So that's just something that I like to put out there for us all, because we're all part in this, and certain patriarchal structures, or all of them actually, are also being supported by women or held up by women, or on the contrary, taken down by women. So you really all have important roles to play in designing and influencing the kind of future that we all would like to see. And I think it starts in all of our heads. At least I still grew up in a time, so probably the oldest here, but I might have grown up in a time where some of these structures were even more present. And for me, it started in my own head, just beginning to observe and to reflect and to see the imbalances and the injustices. So anyway, that's just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that's awesome. I actually love that. And especially you said we have to reflect on how we see each other and also ourselves, right? Because what we think of ourselves and how then we present ourselves makes also such a difference to realize. And I think a lot of women, not all women, of course, we can never generalize, but a lot of women have the issue of the imposter syndrome and talking themselves small. And when we double check and reflect on that we don't need to make ourselves small. I think that's also important. Anyone else would like to comment on this in this area?
I want to share my experience in Taiwan. I
Please.
think I'm lucky to live in Taiwan. In our environment, it's quite interesting. Many people work on wildlife professional are women. And in my rescue center, the veterinary team, we have 5 people, and all of them are women. And the special people work primate, we will call it primate mother. And some people work bear, we will call it bear mother. And all of them are women work on wildlife disease or wildlife conservation. And even in our department, the department chair, woman, and the head, the director of the animal hospital, now all of them are women. So women is quite dominant in Taiwan, especially veterinary department part.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. That's super interesting. Thank you so much for all your input there. We have to soon wrap up, unfortunately, because our time is limited. We did a little round at the beginning, like a speed round. Let's repeat that before we wrap up. And by the way, I have to say, unfortunately, Aricia had to leave us because she warned us at the very beginning that she has a baby dolphin she might be called to take care of and do a procedure on. So I feel like she has the best excuse ever to run away from us, but very sad. But I hope the baby dolphin is okay. All right, but let's do our little speed round to finish up. So what is one piece of advice you would give a young woman starting out in the field of wildlife health today? Yeah, try to keep it as short as possible. Sharon, do you want to start? I know, not an easy task.
I think just having the audacity is one of the things you should strive to do. And something I've learned is also just showing yourself the same compassion that you extend to your work. You should also just show it inward. That's something I really try and just tell every single veterinarian, especially female veterinarian, that you need to show that same compassion to yourself.
That's amazing. Siska, what is your advice?
Oh, I have many. For young women who wants to work in wildlife health, yeah, be critical, first of all. And I'm critical, touching a bit on what Kim earlier mentioned about seeing yourself, reflect on how you position yourself and how you see others, not just based on their profile, but really on what they have got to offer professionally. And then next one is find your group. I mean, having a support system is crucial. We are women, we have so many things in our box, and we do code switching so many times. Sometimes we're a mother, sometimes we're a student, sometimes we're a daughter, sometimes we're a professional. And having a support system in all those roles is very crucial. And lastly, I think in terms of leadership, you have to practice taking responsibilities since very early on in your career, because being a leader also means that you need to be comfortable in making decisions, making responsibilities. And if you do not train yourself to be comfortable with that situation, it will be hard to be a better leader in the future. So yeah, as early as possible, try taking responsibilities, and it will help along our career.
Thank you. That's awesome. Sam, what's your advice for a young woman starting out?
I think folks have said some awesome things. So I think one, to add on, be flexible. You're going to have to pivot. It's wildlife. As I think Sharon said at the start, the only thing that's known and we can know about wildlife is you never know what's happening. So you're always going to have to be flexible that way. I suggest going where wildlife are. If you get the opportunity to, you're going to get and see more that way. And I just wanted to throw out a plug that like we're waiting for you folks and we're excited for you. So please, as others have said, and we want to help you navigate some of this stuff. So reach out because we're just so darn excited to get like new folks into this profession and start really like showcasing your talents.
Awesome, thanks. May, do you have any short piece of advice?
Yes, for me, I think there's no gender difference between us, and try to believe in your voice. And I think your voice is stronger than you think. And I really the word from Little Prince. They say when you want to do something, all the universe will try to help you. So just do it if you want to do anything about the wildlife.
Amazing, thank you. Kim, I think you're the last one. No pressure.
So many amazing things have been said already, but maybe just one more thought from my experience. Be careful, especially in field situation, depending on where you are and where you go. Make sure that you really take good care of yourself, protect yourself. And yeah, don't let anyone, including yourself, pressure yourself or blackmail yourself into a situation where you feel like, oh, maybe this is my only chance to have a shot at this career. So I have to do this or that. Don't think that there will always be new opportunities, and don't blackmail yourself into situations that may be dangerous for you.
Thank you so much, all. May, Sharon, Aricia, Kim, Sam, and Siska for being so open, honest, and generous with your time today. On International Women's Day, I can't think of 6 better people to have in the room as my guests. Thanks for listening to the Wildlife Health Talks. We will be back with a new story in 2 weeks. Bye for now.